From the moment Luther Vandross entered the world of music, he stood as a living paradox. Despite being known for his iconic love ballads that resonated with countless listeners worldwide, he remained without a significant romantic relationship throughout his life. In this video, we'll delve into Luther's life, career, and the loneliness that profoundly shaped his personal journey. Luther Ronzoni Vandross Jr. was born on April 20th, 1951, in the bustling heart of New York City. He grew up on Manhattan's Lower East Side, within the Alfred E. Smith Public Housing Development, surrounded by the vibrant culture of music. Luther's family was a close-knit and musical one. His mother, Mary Ida Vandross, was a nurse, while his father, Luther Vandross Sr., worked as an upholsterer. From an early age, Luther's talent for music was undeniable. By the age of 3, he had already taught himself to play the piano simply by listening and experimenting with sounds. Luther's childhood was filled with joy, days at the beach, dancing in the living room, and shared laughter with his family. But his early happiness was shattered when his father passed away suddenly in 1959, shortly after a day spent at the beach. Luther was only 8 years old when he lost his father, and the grief left a lasting mark. Music soon became Luther's escape, his solace in a time of overwhelming sadness. In a 2002 interview, Luther revealed, "I still carry that pain with me, and whenever I see a father-son relationship portrayed in movies or TV, it fills me with a sense of loss." Music ran deep in the Vandross family. His late father had been a singer, and his older sister, Patricia, performed with a local doo-wop group called the Crests, alongside 4 boys from the neighborhood. The group was on the verge of a breakthrough, preparing for a promotional tour across the country. However, when Patricia asked their mother for permission to join the tour, Mary Ida refused, and Patricia had to abandon her musical dreams. Soon after, the Crests found success with their first hit, leaving Patricia to wonder what might have been. Patricia and their other sister, Anne, often accompanied a young Luther to theaters, where he watched the performances of legendary artists like Dionne Warwick and Aretha Franklin. These experiences ignited a spark in Luther. Already drawn to music, seeing performers like Dionne and Diana Ross on stage deepened his desire to follow in their footsteps. Dionne Warwick, in particular, became his greatest influence. Her voice, grace, and style left a lasting impression on him as he developed his own artistry. When asked why 3 female singers, Dionne, Aretha, and Diana, were his primary inspirations, Luther responded, "I remember watching Dionne Warwick perform at the Brooklyn Fox Theater, and that was the moment I knew I wanted to do what she did." His admiration for these women shaped his approach to music as he progressed in his career. In high school, Luther's love for music was instinctual. He formed a group with his friends called Shades of Jade, which included one of his best friends, Robin. Despite his talent, Luther faced setbacks. He performed multiple times at the Apollo Theater's famous amateur night, but failed to win. At 16, he also experienced heartbreak. Unrequited love left him feeling alienated. According to Craig Seymour's book Luther, The Life and Longing of Luther Vandross, Luther described the pain of rejection. The person was kind, but it was clear they weren't interested. It was heartbreaking. Food became Luther's comfort in times of emotional distress. "Whenever I felt down, I'd turn to food," he admitted. Still, his dream of making it in the music industry remained strong. Shades of Jade eventually caught the attention of the Apollo's youth program. Luther's smooth, distinct voice made him stand out, and soon he became one of the group's key talents. The group even performed at the Harlem Cultural Festival in 1969 and later appeared on the pilot episode of Sesame Street. Despite these early accomplishments, Luther still hadn't experienced romantic love. In a candid 1990 interview, he reflected, "While everyone else was falling in love, I was focused on music. Maybe I missed out on romance, but my life was in the music. It was my obsession, and it still is." Throughout his time at William Howard Taft High School, Luther also nurtured another passion, his love for Patti LaBelle. He was the proud president of the first-ever Patti LaBelle fan club, taking his role very seriously. After high school and a brief stint at Western Michigan University, Luther decided to fully commit to his music career. He networked relentlessly, building connections, and seeking out opportunities while working in a store in the city. Then, an extraordinary opportunity arose. Ken Harper, a former DJ, was producing an all-black version of The Wizard of Oz for Broadway, called The Wiz. Luther submitted his original composition, Everybody Rejoice, which became a major part of the show's success. Another pivotal moment in Luther's career came through his work with David Bowie. Luther Vandross' connection to David Bowie came through a close friend, Robin, who had married a guitarist working alongside the British rock icon. One day, Robin invited Luther to a studio session where Bowie was working on Young Americans. While listening to an early version of the album, Luther offered some suggestions, impressing Bowie. This encounter led to Luther being hired not only as a background vocalist, but also as an arranger and melody writer for the project. One of Luther's original songs, Funky Music, was reworked by Bowie into Fascination, which would feature on the Young Americans album. Luther toured with Bowie as a background singer, and later even opened for him during the 1974 tour. By January 5, 1975, The Wiz, for which Luther had contributed music, premiered on Broadway, and in March of the same year, Young Americans was released, becoming Bowie's highest-selling album in the U.S. After his stint on the road with Bowie, Luther found himself working with the legendary Bette Midler, arranging her live performances and singing background vocals. Though his voice graced the stage, Luther remained hidden behind a curtain while Midler's well-known trio of backup singers, who she referred to as the Harlettes, performed front and center. Luther didn't fit the typical mold of the slim, female vocalists Midler preferred, but he harmonized beautifully from the shadows. Still, Luther yearned to be seen as well as heard, so he took a leap and formed his own group, aptly named Luther. The co-ed group, which included former Shades of Jade members Anthony Hinton and Diane Sumler, alongside Teresa V. Reed and Christine Wiltshire had some moderate success with their singles, though none of the songs made a significant impact on the charts. Around this time, Luther supplemented his income by writing jingles and providing background vocals for iconic artists like Chaka Khan, Roberta Flack, and his lifelong musical inspiration, Diana Ross. By the mid-70s, he was earning upwards of $600,000 a year, but his group eventually disbanded by 1980. Luther's talent didn't go unnoticed, however. That same year, he caught the eye of French-Italian music entrepreneur Jacques-Fred Petrus, who had formed the dance group Change. Petrus invited Luther to be a featured singer, and they produced two hit singles, Searching and The Glow of Love, both of which climbed to the top of the U.S. dance charts. Despite this success, Luther opted out of a second project with Petrus, dissatisfied with the compensation offered. But his luck hadn't run out yet. That very year, Luther signed a solo deal with Epic Records, marking the beginning of a legendary solo career. His debut album, Never Too Much, released in 1981, featured the title track that became an instant classic. The song soared to the top of the R&B charts and solidified Luther's place as a rising force in the industry. But the album's success didn't stop there. Tracks like Don't You Know That in a House Is Not a Home showcased Luther's incredible vocal range and emotional depth, further proving his unique ability to convey heartache and passion through his music. Throughout the 1980s, Luther continued to release platinum-selling albums, building a legacy of timeless love songs. His second album, Forever for Always for Love, came out in 1982 and featured popular tracks like Bad Boy Having a Party and a beautiful cover of Since I Lost My Baby. The world truly came to know Luther in 1982 when he was nominated for a Grammy. Although he lost to James Ingram, the nomination alone signified his growing influence. That same year, Luther fulfilled a dream by working with one of his musical idols, Aretha Franklin. He produced her album Jump to It, which included the title track that gave Franklin her first top 40 hit in 6 years. The album went gold, marking a high point for both Luther and Aretha. However, their collaboration wasn't without tension. While working on Franklin's follow-up album in 1983, Luther's suggestions on how she should approach certain vocals didn't sit well with her. Franklin, who had been a major influence on Luther, was offended by his advice, believing she didn't need anyone telling her how to sing. The disagreement escalated, leading Aretha to abruptly leave the session and drive all the way back to Detroit. With the album's production stalled, Luther faced pressure from record executives to resolve the situation. Fortunately, Cissy Houston, Whitney Houston's mother, intervened, bringing Luther and Aretha back together to finish the project. The result was the successful release of Get It Right in 1983. That same year, Luther released his own album Busybody, featuring the hit single Superstar. The album also included the beautiful duet How Many Times Can We Say Goodbye with none other than his musical muse, Dionne Warwick, a dream collaboration for him. When asked what sparked his passion for music, Luther often recounted a memory of sitting in a theater, watching a girl in a red dress perform songs like Don't Make Me Over and Walk On By. That performer was Dionne Warwick, and in that moment, Luther knew he wanted to touch people through music the same way she had moved him. This connection grew into a lifelong friendship between Luther and Dionne. In 1985, Luther's keen eye for talent led him to discover a young boy with an extraordinary voice while watching Star Search. The 14-year-old Jimmy Salvamini caught Luther's attention and immediately reached out, inviting Jimmy and his brother Larry to Los Angeles. Luther helped negotiate a $250,000 contract with Elektra Records for Jimmy and produced his debut album. Amid his professional success, personal challenges persisted. In 1985, rumors circulated in the British press that Luther had contracted AIDS after he dramatically lost 126 pounds. Luther vehemently denied the claims, going so far as to threaten legal action against the magazine Blues and Soul for spreading the misinformation. While Luther was able to set the record straight, the rumors reignited speculation about his private life, particularly his love life, which had long been a topic of intrigue. While working on Jimmy Salvamini's album in Los Angeles, Luther Vandross formed a deep bond with the Salvamini brothers. He took them under his wing, showing them the sights of LA while perfecting the music. Luther spared no effort, even bringing in big names like Irene Cara and Cheryl Lynn to contribute to the project. However, tragedy struck the day after the album was completed. Luther, Jimmy, and Larry were driving along Laurel Canyon Boulevard in Luther's Mercedes when they were involved in a devastating crash. Luther walked away with minor injuries, while Jimmy was rushed to the hospital with a collapsed lung. Sadly, Larry's injuries were far more severe, and he passed away at the hospital. Initially, Luther was charged with felony vehicular manslaughter, but prosecutors eventually dropped the case due to insufficient evidence. However, the Salvamini family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Luther, which was settled for approximately $630,000. The loss of Larry profoundly affected Luther, though he never spoke publicly about it. Larry had become one of Luther's closest friends, and the emotional toll of losing him was enormous. Despite his grief, Luther's career continued to flourish. His 1986 album Give Me the Reason reinforced his status as a top R&B artist with hits like Stop to Love and So Amazing. His music videos also gained significant attention on MTV, expanding his audience and earning him crossover success. But even at the height of his career, Luther faced personal struggles, including a lifelong battle with his weight. Luther's personal grief deepened in 1987 when his longtime drummer, Yogi Horton, died by self-unalive. The emotional toll caused Luther to gain significant weight, making his physical appearance in person notably different from his slimmed-down image in his MTV videos. Despite these challenges, Luther's star power continued to shine. Some even called him a diva, due to his strong personality and feuds with other stars, notably Anita Baker. Their feud began at the 1987 Grammys, where they were set to perform a duet of Your Precious Love, a Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell classic. However, on the day of the event, Anita decided to perform a Billie Holiday tribute instead, leaving Luther out of the performance. This decision upset him, especially as he also lost his Grammy nomination that night. Despite the tension, the two eventually co-headlined a tour together called The Heat. The tour was commercially successful, but Luther and Anita avoided each other off stage, with Luther going as far as to have curtains put up to ensure they wouldn't cross paths backstage. Though he was a beloved artist, Luther had not won a Grammy by 1991, despite years of nominations. That changed when he released Power of Love, which earned him his first Grammy for Best Male R&B Vocal Performance. The title track, and Don't Want to Be a Fool, became major hits, and the album went platinum, reaffirming Luther's status as an R&B powerhouse. In 1993, Luther released his 8th studio album, Never Let Me Go. Unfortunately, it was his first album not to debut at #1 on the R&B charts and failed to receive the critical acclaim he had grown accustomed to. The album's promotional tour was equally tumultuous. The girl group En Vogue, who had joined the tour as an opening act, abruptly quit due to conflicts with Luther. They had signed a contract agreeing not to wear specific colors or outfits that would clash with Luther's backup singers, but tensions flared when they felt restricted and received negative reviews for their performances. Luther, determined to maintain his show's aesthetic, refused to compromise, leading to a blow-up that resulted in Luther calling the police on the group. Beyond the professional conflicts, Luther faced personal challenges during this period. His sister, Patricia, passed away in the middle of the tour, and his longtime manager, Billy Bass, also quit, citing Luther's unhappiness offstage as a source of strain for those around him. When the tour ended, Luther returned home to an empty house, with no one to share his success or his sorrow. In 1994, Luther released Songs, an album of covers that showcased his versatility. The album featured his renditions of Lionel Richie's Hello and a duet with Mariah Carey, Endless Love, which became a massive hit. Despite commercial success, critics panned the album for lacking authenticity. After Songs, Luther took a break from music to focus on his health, as his weight had ballooned to 314 pounds. He embarked on a strict diet and exercise routine in an attempt to regain control of his health. By 2001, Luther was ready for a comeback. He signed with Clive Davis's J Records and released a self-titled album that featured the hit Take You Out, a track that remains popular today. In 2003, Luther released what would be his final studio album, Dance with My Father. The deeply personal title track, which reflected on the loss of his father, won the Grammy for Song of the Year in 2004. However, Luther was unable to attend the ceremony in person, as his health had begun to deteriorate. In April 2003, Luther suffered a severe stroke that left him in a coma for nearly 2 months. The stroke affected his ability to speak and sing, and although he spent the remaining years of his life in recovery, he was never able to fully return to his former self. Despite his struggles with health, Luther longed for love in his final years. According to associates, he desperately wished to have a romantic partner, but remained single until the end of his life. Luther Vandross, the man whose voice had brought love into the lives of so many through his music, passed away on July 1st, 2005, at the age of 54. His mother accepted his final awards on his behalf, continuing to honor his legacy even after his death. Though Luther had an audience that adored him, his deepest desire, for a romantic love to share his life with, remained unfulfilled. Luther was a true icon, his music transcending generations and inspiring countless artists who followed. He was the velvet voice of R&B, a superstar whose legacy continues to shine brightly even after his passing. Luther Vandross may have sung about love, but his own search for it remained elusive. Through his music, he brought joy and passion to millions, leaving behind a legacy that will be cherished for generations. Thank you for joining us as we explored the tragic loneliness behind Luther Vandross' iconic career. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories from the world of music. Until next time, keep the music alive in your heart.